Wonderful to be here. Fantastic to be at the Berlin School of Creative Leadership. I think, not to carry on talking about that for a moment, but I think what Michael has done with that and his team has been quite remarkable. And I congratulate him. And I remember when he was setting it up, and you know, like all those things, it's very, very hard to do. And Michael was saying to me, "Why have I done this?" And you know, it had a difficult moment, and we can see why he's done it because of the fantastic results. So anyway, I'm here to talk about my book. First of all, why did I write a book? The reason is that I was asked, actually, because I'm an art director. I'm not a writer. I've spent most of my career saying to all the writers I've worked with, remember, words are a barrier to communication. Take them out. Get rid of them. Take them away. And I used to annoy the writers by saying that. And so eventually I've now ended up writing a book. One of the things that's quite interesting about doing this is that I thought actually one of the things that would be really good is that finally I can write something I don't have a client. All right, isn't that brilliant? I don't have a client. But I ended up with a client. The client was the bloody publisher because we came to that debate about what we should call the book. Now I had certain points of view about that, as you can imagine. And I wanted to call it "Don't Read This Book," with it crossed out, on the basis that if you tell somebody not to do something, they're definitely going to do it. And I had that wonderful debate with them when they said, "Oh, no, we can't possibly do that. It won't sell, it won't do that." And so I ended up with a client. It's just amazing, isn't it? Whatever you do in life, whatever happens in life, you always have a client. That's the thing that I've realized. So it's my first lesson for the evening. Always have a client.
Got to serve somebody.
The other thing too is I didn't really want to write a how-to book. I thought, you know, I'd spent my life telling people not to read books on advertising, which is actually why I thought it'd been great if I'd called it "Don't Read This Book," was when somebody came to me and said, "John, I didn't like your book." I said, "Well, I told you not to read it. Bloody, you know, with it crossed out, I told you." You know. I thought I'd just talk about what I've experienced, the things I've seen, the people I've worked with, the changes that have happened. And I think, you know, one of the things that I do actually wake up every morning and think I was really, really lucky to have worked in advertising. I think it's the most remarkable industry. It's given me an incredible life. I've met the most fantastic people, traveled to the most wonderful places, and it's taught me so much. And the one thing that, you know, I always say to people in advertising, I don't think there can be any other industry where 60 seconds can change your life. And I'm going to show you something now, 60 seconds, that actually changed my life. And I think, you know, it's almost remarkable to think about it like that, to think that I'm going to do something tomorrow that is going to actually change my life, change the fortunes of a brand and change the fortunes of my life. And I think that's the genius of what we're doing. Because I always say to people, look, you know, I work in advertising, I don't live in advertising. And I think the huge danger that we all suffer from is to think that we work in an industry called advertising. We do. And the trouble is people start living in that industry as well. They live in that world. And consequently, their work gets less and less good because they're not experiencing life, they're not bringing life into their work and making it very, very different. So I'm going to show you something. This 60 seconds changed my life. And I've got my technical assistant over here, Sheridan, so if it all goes wrong, blame him. And we're just going to show you this. Now, you may know it, you may have seen it, but this 60 seconds changed my life.
Some other God you knew before.
So that kind of, you know, in a way changed my life, changed the fortunes of Levi's. And not only that, it changed the underwear all you men are wearing. All right? Because, let me tell you this, when we submitted that script, which we'd written, we have a thing called the ITVA, which you have to submit scripts to before they can be shown on television. They're submitted to make sure they're, you know, telling the truth and they're not indecent or whatever it might be. Anyway, they rejected the script, because in the script we had the man getting undressed, getting down to his, what we call Y-fronts, you know, like a pair of Speedos. The authorities said, I'm very sorry, we cannot approve this script. This is indecent, man going in and getting undressed like that. And we said, no, it's just like a pair of swimming trunks. They said, nope, sorry, we will not approve the script. And we had this huge impasse. And then we were, you know, what can we do? He's got to get undressed. And then they came back and they said to us, if you put him into a pair of boxer shorts, that would be all right. And we all went, boxer shorts? And there's those really dodgy garments Americans used to wear in the late 40s, weren't they? Boxer shorts. Who wears boxer shorts? So we said, fine. You know, if it means it gets the script through, we'll put him in boxer shorts. We put him in boxer shorts, and the sales of boxer shorts went through the roof as well as 501. So I am responsible, ladies. You're looking at the man who got all these guys into boxer shorts, right? So it's one of my claims to fame. I've changed the underwear that men wear. So anyway, so how did I get into advertising? How did it happen to me? I thought I wanted to be a painter. I wanted to be the next Picasso. I thought that was brilliant because I thought about all the women that he was able to go out with, and I thought that's what I want to do, paint pictures and go out with very, very beautiful women. I went to art school, and there was one minor flaw in this scheme, which I thought was perfect. I had it completely sorted out. My life was going to be like this. And the flaw in this scheme was I couldn't paint. That is a bit of a problem if you want to be the next Picasso, because he actually was quite a good painter. But I was fortunate, and I had a wonderful, wonderful teacher who said to me, John, you know, I don't think it's going to happen. You know, I don't think painting is going to make it for you, but you constantly seem to have ideas. You just love having ideas. Why don't you go and do graphic design? And I thought, well, that's interesting. I should listen to this man. He talks a lot of sense. I didn't know any graphic designers who went out with lots of beautiful women, but I thought maybe it might be a chance, you know. So I went to, and he said, go to the London College of Printing, the LCP as it was then called, it's now called the London College of Communications, and study graphic design and do, you know, where ideas will be celebrated and you'll be, you know. So anyway, so I go to the LCP, and I sort of get there, and I find all the designers wanted to go back and be painters. And I just left there. And I thought, this is very, very confusing. And I just wanted to have ideas. I love the idea of starting with a blank page. You know, I loved it. I love the idea. Right, so what are we going to have? Let's have an idea, you know, which seemed to me very, very exciting. And I was, again, very lucky. And I met a man there, a teacher, wonderful lecturer called John Gillard. And John Gillard showed me the work of this man here that we will all know, but I'm going to show it to you anyway. Not that. That. And then, of course, he showed me that one as well. And it was like one of those light bulb moments. You know, you have those light bulb moments when all of a sudden your life changes, just like that. I suddenly looked at a thing called advertising. He talked to me about advertising. And I suddenly realized, you know, advertising, this stuff that I was surrounded by that I'd never really noticed. It could be intelligent, it could be smart, it could be funny, but actually it could be inclusive. And that's the crucial thing. It could include. But that's fundamentally what advertising has to do. And so this work for me changed my life and really got me interested to go into advertising. And I think it, you know, we all know it's a seminal campaign. We all know that it was Bill Bernbach who, you know, he really invented what I call modern advertising. I always think that there have been only two great agencies in the world, in my view. One of them is Dordane Bernbach, and the other is Collett Dickinson Pierce. That was an agency in London. And what made DDB great was, as I said, they invented modern advertising. CDP, what CDP did was that they brought it to the masses. They made creativity the thing that huge brands bought into. So, you know, I get very upset when I constantly see agencies and creative people doing scam work and doing stuff that doesn't really run, because you're not enhancing our industry. What Collins did is that they showed the world, or they showed everybody in the UK, they showed all those other dumb agencies, and there were a lot of them, that actually creativity is the answer. And it made everybody in the UK aware of it. And that was a brilliant thing that they did, and I admire them forever for doing that. There's one other thing about this campaign that I love, and if you buy my book, the story's in there, but I'm going to do it, is I've always thought this is fantastic. It's very interesting. I've never actually sort of told this story in Germany, but I will tell it to you now. I think very interesting this account went to Bill Bernbach in 1959, 1960, something like that. And if you think about it, Germany just come out of a war, pretty terrible, you know, trying to rebuild its economy. Car industry, fundamentally important to the industry in Germany. They only really had one product they could sell, that car. Wasn't a very good car, you know, rear engine, slid about all over the road, you know, it was pretty hopeless actually, noisy. It was, however, reliable. That was its great scheme. So anyway, they go to Bill Bernbach and they say, will you advertise this car? Bernbach does, and he creates a seminal campaign that turns the Beetle into an iconic brand, and therefore helps rebuild the car industry in Germany, that helps rebuild the German economy. The point about that story is Bernbach was a Jew. How about that? Isn't that fantastic? He was a businessman as well. But I think that's a fantastic story. It tells us about forgiveness. It tells about moving forward. It tells us about, you know, don't hold grudges, keep going. And I think that's one of the other reasons why I think that's a genius campaign. However, I shall now go on. Now this is funny enough, talking about Israel. I don't know why this is a coincidence. One of the things I got to do, I'm very lucky, I got to work on, Israel had just had a 6-day war, and they were trying to encourage people to go there as tourists, and they thought we should talk about sunshine, because it was very sunny in Israel. And we said, well, this is a bit stupid, because we can go to Spain for sunshine. We don't have to go to Israel and probably get blown up, you know. You've got to think of something else. And so we talked about their biblical connections. And we wrote this ad. You've read a lot about us already, as a way of talking about why you should go to Israel. It was hugely successful. But the other thing that happens to you, when you convince a client to think differently, they all go back to, they kind of go back to their default position. Their default position is, yeah, I know, John, that's really great, but we really would love to talk about sunshine. And so you go, all right, okay, you want to talk about sunshine. So, okay, there is always a way out of it. So we did this ad here, and it just says, yes, it has been known to rain in Israel. And that was the way of talking about sunshine. So, you know, there's always, when you're dealing with a client, there's always a way out. Listening to what they say, but giving it to them in a way which holds true for the campaign and holds true for what you're trying to do. The next piece of work I'm going to show you is this is, I started working with Charles Saatchi. Well, I was about 3 weeks into my first job, and the creative director came into my office, and he said, oh, John, we've found a writer for you to work with. I thought, brilliant. Oh, great, I've got a writer to work with. Fantastic, you know, writers, as we know. And I said, what's his name? And he said to me, Charles Saatchi. And I went, oh, shit. Oh, he's Italian. He therefore lives at home with mum, and he can't spell. That's the writer I've got to work with, you know. And of course, I was right on two fronts. He did live at home with mum, He couldn't spell, but he wasn't Italian. So I started working with Charles Saatchi, and it was one of those sort of great, we had a great time together, and we worked on lots of things. And there's another interesting story about that, and this is for all those creative people, you know, here. And, you know, one of the things that I got lucky. You know, I really did get lucky. You may not know, but Hegarty is an Irish name. My father was Irish, and he always used to say to me, John, you know, there's no point being Irish if you can't get lucky. So, you know, get lucky is one of the things I should advise you to always do. And when I left college, I had this portfolio, and I was offered 2 jobs. One of them was at Young and Rubicam, and it was on a quite nice salary. And the other was at a now defunct agency called Benson & Bowles, which was a big American agency that became part of Macias, and I don't know who they're part of now, God only knows, you know, anyway. And I sort of, you know, and it was at half the salary. So you might think, well, not much of a decision to make there, John, is there? And I talked to a friend of mine about it, and he said, well, I don't know, John, I think there's a very, very good art director who's gone to Benson & Bowles, who is from New York, who I think will be very interesting, and I think I know it's only half the money, but I would go to Benson & Bowles rather than go for double the money to Y&R. So I did. I went to Benson & Bowles, and within 3 weeks, I started working with Charles Saatchi, and you can argue that had a tremendous impact on my career and on my life from that moment on. So, you know, the answer there is, remember, money has a voice, it doesn't have a soul. Or another way of thinking about it, money is a tool, not a philosophy. And the number of times, you know, creative people walk into my office and say, you know, hey John, it's been great working at BBH. You know, we've been offered all this money by agency X. I won't mention any agency names just in case I upset somebody. And, you know, they're doubling our salary and kind of that. And you go, why are you doing it? Well, you know, they're doubling our salary and they're doing that. And I say, but, you know, this is I believe, a very important point. I think advertising is probably the most creative industry you can work in. The most creative industry you can work in, because you have to come in every day and have a new idea. Can't be like yesterday's idea. It's got to be a new idea. And that's relentless. It's relentless. You know, I always sort of say, you know, if you're Mick Jagger, you can go around the world singing Jumping Jack Flash, and, you know, written in 1968, and 30,000 people turn up and applaud you, you know. If I was to get out one of my old ads from 1968, people would go, John, please, you know, leave it alone, will you, you know. So, you know, so it's relentlessly creative, relentlessly so. So you've got to say to yourself, if you're a creative person, because most creative people have 10 years. Now that's tough, 10 years. You think about it, you know. I mean, there are a few creative people, Picasso, of course, who I wanted to be, but I wasn't, you know. But if you think about most artists, most writers, architects, painters, they do their great work in a 10-year period. And then essentially they kind of go on repeating it, because they can do. You know, I always think, you know, Francis Bacon painted, you know, constantly painted those people with twisted faces, you know, kind of. And you imagine, you know, I imagine him sort of bringing in his latest painter to his agent and saying, here's my new painting, and his agent looking at it and going, oh, Francis, not another twisted face, you know. Why don't you go out and do a nice landscape or something, nice sunny day, do something different. Well, we have to. And the point about that is the question for you is, how do you turn 10 years into 15 years into 20 years? And you do that simply by surrounding yourself with interesting, stimulating people. And this is the problem for creative people. You know, if you're an account person or a planner, you can go to any number of agencies and work on P&G or work on something else and it can be really, really, you know, very good for you, really fantastic. You get a lot of experience, learn about those companies, whatever that company might be. For a creative person, unless you're surrounded by other creative people who are pushing, you begin to slip back. It's a bit like a sports person. You know, you've got to be constantly playing in the Premier Division. You can't play in the second division. If you start playing in the second division, you start playing like the second division. So we have a real problem. We have to surround ourselves with great people. And that way, we keep our work fresh. And it's a real kind of, you know, and so when people come into me, teams come into me and say, hey, I'm going to agency X because they've doubled my salary, and they're not, I know they're not very good at the moment, but they said they're going to change the creative department, and you go, crap, you know, crap. They're never going to change. They are what they are. And you've accepted an amount of money, and actually, it'll be all over. So that's one of my bits of advice. This is, when I was working with Charlie at the consultancy, we got to work on a newly formed part of the government information, and it was about, one of the briefs we got about contraception, and get people to understand more about contraception and adopt it. And we all got this brief, and I kind of worked on it, and I came up with this idea, and I thought this is brilliant. My idea is really, really brilliant, and it was a picture of a sort of 14-year-old, 13-year-old schoolgirl in a school uniform, and she was like 8 months pregnant. And it just said, who taught your daughter the facts of life? I thought, this is fantastic. So winner, I've got it, I've cracked it. And just as I was about to go and show everybody, Jeremy Sinclair, who worked at the consultancy as well, showed me this idea. And it said, would you be more careful if it was you that got pregnant? And at that moment, I really hated him. Not only did I hate him, I hated that idea. I loathed it. And you really know when an idea is great, really great, when you really, really hate it. Because what you're experiencing is, oh God, why didn't I do that? That's what you're really experiencing, that's why you hate it. And Jeremy had done this with another art director, and it was genius. And again, it kind of captured the social revolution, the sexual revolution that was happening in 1969 and was to go through the 70s, and became a seminal piece of creative work for Saatchi and Saatchi, although in fact it was done at Kramer Saatchi, not Saatchi and Saatchi, which pisses Ross Kramer off enormously. But anyway, that's another story. This is, we worked on a number of briefs there, and this is another one that we did, that I worked on. And this is great, actually. This is about food hygiene. And for those who can't, it says, this is what happens when a fly lands on your food. Flies can't eat solid food, so to soften it up, they vomit on it. Then, you know what vomit is? Bleh, like that. Then they stamp the vomit in until it's liquid, usually stamping in a few germs for good measure. Then when it's good and runny, they suck it all back again, probably dropping some excrement at the same time. Excrement, shit, by the way, for those who don't know. And then when they finish eating, it's your turn. Now, what's brilliant about that, let me tell you what's brilliant about that, is the only bit that we wrote was, this is what happens when a fly lands on your food. And then when they finished eating, it's your turn. That middle bit came out of a government leaflet. It was a technical piece of information describing what and, you know, so often, you know, I say the solution to your problem is lying in front of you. You just haven't looked, or you haven't gone in and found out about it, or you haven't delved into the background of a piece of advertising or a piece of thinking. And the solution is often just there. And that was exactly that. Actually, the other reason I'm quite proud of it is that David Ogilvy wrote 2 books, Confessions of an Advertising Man, and his second book, which is, I think, called Ogilvy on Advertising, actually, somewhat similar title. And in it, he had these mad rules, Ogilvy. He sort of said you shouldn't reverse things out. And he's taken that ad, and he's shown that he should have been black out of white, not white out of black. I'm quite pleased about that, really. Of course, he's completely wrong, but, you know, that was David Ogilvy. That's why you should buy my book, not his, by the way. That's kind of... The other thing is working with a guy like Charles Saatchi. Charles Saatchi was a very interesting character, but he was, which is probably why he's been so successful in the art market. Charlie was a genuine entrepreneur. He always looked for kind of how can I make things happen. He never accepted and waited for something to happen. He would be always proactive. And one of the things that he always did when we started the agency in 1970, he would always try and get stories about the agency into the press. He'd always, how can we get stories about the agency into the press? Winning a piece of business, doing a bit of creative, whatever it was. And I remember a period of time we didn't have much going on, and Charlie was pulling his hair out. My God, we've got to get a story into the newspapers, something about the agency. And so he had this brilliant idea, and he said, I know what we're going to do. I'm going to insure the creative department for £1 million. Now, this is 1971, so £1 million, a lot of money back then. £1 million. And what's more, I'm going to institute a transfer fee. So everybody wants to poach one of the creative people. They're going to have to pay a transfer fee, just as though, like in a football. And so he created the story, got it insured, found a friend who ran an insurance, insured it, and this is the photograph that was taken. That's Charlie. That's me next to him. God, yes. Anyway, sitting on a park bench like a football team. But the point is, what's brilliant about that is there's a newspaper in the UK, the largest selling quality newspaper on the Sunday in the UK, and he got the story onto the back page. And now that is genius, complete fabrication, of course. And that's probably why it says the price on their heads. And he got the story. So if you're starting a company, if you're doing something, how am I going to get into the press? What am I going to do? Not waiting for it to happen, but being proactive. And that's why I learned a lot from dear Charlie. And a brilliant story. And as I say, there it is on the back page of the Sunday Times business section. Circulation of about 2 million back then, which is a fantastic achievement. This is 1982. I'm just sort of flipping forward here. This is the very first piece of creative work we did for Levi's. And they came to us and they said, look, we've appointed you, and we've got to do this work. We're launching black denim. We've got some posters. Can you do something very quickly? I came up with this idea, and they said to me, yeah, but John, where the picture of the jeans? And I said, well, I think people know what a pair of jeans is like. We're now got to emphasize the fact that they're black. And they kind of went, no, John, you've got to have a picture of the pair of jeans. And I said, no, you don't, promise you, this is fantastic. Anyway, long story. Eventually, the copy date kept looming, and I kept refusing to change it, not going back with a picture of a pair of jeans in there. And eventually, they had to buy it because they were just running out of time. It had to go up. It was a fairly short run. Anyway, it goes up, and it gets a lot of response. But more than that, a man called Robert Haas, who is the great-great-grandson of Levi Strauss, chairman of the board in San Francisco, sees it, has it framed, put in his office, and says, this is what this company should always be about. And Levi's gave me a black sheep to say, thank you for doing that. Thank you for forcing us to do that. And the black sheep then, if you see in the bottom right-hand corner, it became our logo. So out of our culture, out of a client's culture, doing some creative work for them, we created a bit of culture for ourselves. The other thing I talk about is I think one of the other things about creative people is that you kind of have to, when you do work, I was always interested. I don't really spend a lot of time looking at other advertising. I think I look at it for historical reasons, but not necessarily for inspiration. I try and go and look at architecture or films or paintings or whatever it is, just walking around. And I think in life, if you're a creative person, it always struck me as interesting that, if you talk to an architect or if you talk to a painter, if you talk to a novelist, they have a point of view about what it is they believe in. What sort of work do they want to do? And I know that, we have to work on a multitude of accounts and a multitude of pieces of business. But I think unless you've got a kind of a point of view about your work, the things that you're trying to do, you will never be a really, really great creative person. And I was asked this is about 20 years ago now, to give a lecture by Terence Conran, who's a quite famous designer and retailer in the UK. And Terence said to me, John, I want you to give this lecture, and I'd love you to talk about what you look for in a great idea. And I was quite taken aback by this, and I thought, I don't know, it's what I like, which makes a very short lecture. So I thought I'd better think about this. And it was interesting, really, because I hadn't really considered it. I hadn't really thought about what is it I really love about the ideas? It was just purely instinctive. If I saw something and I loved it, I knew I loved it, and that was it. I didn't, in a sense, go through a process, but now I had to do a lecture and talk about what it is I looked for. And I sort of went back and looked at my work and looked at the work I loved, and I realized the thing that I was mad about, and the thing that constantly drove me, was irreverence. I loved the idea of irreverence. So, irreverent. You look at that early Volkswagen work, irreverent. And all the work that I've done has been about irreverence. And what was interesting about that, and I think the other thing too, is that when you look at what you're doing and when you think about it, is not to look at other advertising, but then to look at other worlds. How do other creative areas operate? And so what I did is I sort of, because I did a bit of art history when I was at art school, looked back and realized that art had gone from revering to being irreverent. So if you go to the Renaissance, you look at people like Leonardo and Michelangelo and all those great painters, what they were doing was they were, in a sense, they were commissioned by the church or the leaders or authority or whatever it was to actually enhance the power of the church or a leader or whatever it is. So they were being very reverent to that. They wanted you to worship and adore that work in some shape or form. And then gradually as society evolved and changed and we began to question a lot more, suddenly, we began to be irreverent, and irreverence crept into creativity, reverence crept into art, and it changed. And it didn't just change art, but it changed architecture, it changed design, it changed all kinds of things. And it's a sort of an invigorating sort of aspect of creative work. And I sort of realized that this is what drove me, and that was what my lecture was about. But I didn't really talk a lot about advertising. I talked about other forms of creativity. So, talk about the Pompidou Center in Paris as a fantastically irreverent building. Or you talk about, the Mini, the car. Issigonis, the design of that car, had to solve a problem. How do you make the car bigger but also make it smaller? A conundrum. What he did was very irreverent. He turned the engine sideways. He said an engine doesn't have to be facing forward all the time, it can be sideways, and he made the car bigger. And he looked at great work, and I sort of thought to myself, it's always got, the thing I love is irreverence. And the point about it is, and why that's important for us, is that we're constantly trying to recommit people to our brand and to sort of imply that we're better than the other brand without actually even naming them. So we're constantly being challenged to come up with an idea that says, no, believe in this, this is great, you can look at this. And also, it means that you create work that stands out in a market which is flooded with ideas, flooded with work. Irreverence helps something stand out. And I think it not only works in advertising, but as I said, it works in design, it works in architecture, it works in painting, and it works in organizations. I think organizations that are irreverent, that constantly question and challenge, are organizations that are powerful and go on being relevant. And this was an example of that, one of the things that we did at BBH. And a client said to me, we were working on cat food, and they said, whatever you do, John, you've got to have a pet in a cat food ad. You've got to have a pet. That was it. And so I said, okay, we'll have a pet, but I'm going to put a dog in there, because the dog would love to eat the cat food, because it's so good. And kind of, it created that irreverent thought, that change it, created something really quite interesting and powerful. That was very controversial. I tried to make a black figure the hero, and it upset some people, but I don't mind upsetting people. I think that's quite good. Something interesting about that, a lot of our work is just really a product demonstration. We just find some fact about the product and put it in there, but in a very different and graphic way. There was a little character that was famous in the UK. You could buy little badges, and kids loved him and stuff like that. Doesn't mean anything to you. Now, this is the only piece of advertising I've ever worked on, the only brand I've ever worked on where, thank God, I was working with a woman. And it was for a company called Dr. White's, who makes sanitary protection, right? Now, there's a lot of guys here, you could work on anything, and I believe anybody can work on anything, except if you're a bloke, there's one thing I bet you can't work on, and that's sanitary protection. we won this piece of business, and I was working with this fantastic writer, Barbara Noakes, who was just absolutely brilliant. And she started to explain to me what it's like to have a period. And I was like reeling back in shock and horror. What? And that every month? Every month, John. And she came in, and she'd written this line, and it was just this. And it just said, have you ever wondered how men would carry on if they had periods? And the whole ad was how absolutely dreadful it is to have periods. There was a joke, when we did this, we found there was a joke going round, do a little joke, and it was a mother turns to a little son who's about to be 8 and said, oh, Jack, what would you like for your birthday? And he said, Mum, I'd love to have a packet of Tampax. She goes, what? What? Why do you want a packet of Tampax? He said, well, I want to go skiing, I want to go hang gliding, I want to do all those fabulous things that you do in the back. And that was how, because they were advertised by men, they thought that's what you do. Barbara said to me, John, this is what it's like. The other great thing, we eventually, it's the only time in my life, and we had to present all this work, this is just one of the ads, and we had to present, typical of course, to 4 blokes, you know. When we presented the work, Barbara was there, they had no idea. They looked at it, I've never seen people in such a state of shock. I mean, genuine shock, horrified that they'd hired this agency and this is what they'd come back with. And one of the ads said, call it what you like, a period's a bloody nuisance. All right, now about that. And they were looking at this going, and they just had no way of responding to it. And in the end, we convinced them to do some bit of research because Barbara was convinced it would resonate. And every point that they objected to, women disagreed with them. And so they had to eventually run it. But that was the only time I've done something that, you know, you work on anything. You know, you just find out about it, you can be aware of it. It's the only thing I've ever worked on where I go, that's it, could never have done that. Shall I show you this? I think I should show you this one. This is, I am actually responsible, I am to blame for getting the British to pronounce German very, very, very badly. We were working, we won Audi in 82. It was the first piece of business we worked on. And the bell, who the bell tolls, you know. And one of the things, the problems that Audi had at that time is nobody knew it was German. It wasn't a very German-sounding name. They thought it was made in Belgium or somewhere like that. Let's face it, you know, Belgium, God blimey. And so one of the problems, we had to, you know, talk about it being German, and weren't quite sure how to do it. And I'd been around the factory at Ingolstadt, and I'd gone around to the factory, and they were taking me around, and again, interesting. And I saw an old poster on the wall with Vorsprung, durch, Technik up on it. And I went, what's that? And they said, oh, it was an old advertising line we used to. We don't use that anymore. Okay. Anyway, so come back to the UK, we do all these ads, we're on television, and we're thinking, we've got to tie them all together, and how are we going to do it? And so I said, well, why don't we just end it with Vorsprung, durch, Technik, as they say in Germany. You know, we went, oh, no, John, can't do that, and did some research, and it was all a bit contentious, and the research said, don't do it. You know, it was like, don't mention the war, you know, that old joke, you know. And fortunately, we had a brilliant, brilliant client, Brian Bowler, and Brian said, we're German, we're proud of it, we're going to run it. And so he ran it. And this is the ad that first ran with it. And it's a very funny ad, but you'll realise how ads date themselves, you'll realise why.
The engineers at Audi have come up with a solution to that perennial gliding problem. Not landing where you took off. Of course, marking a glider does call for a rather special car. The Audi Quattro accelerates faster than Concorde. 0 to 60. It's capable of 135 miles an hour with or without a following wind. And because all 4 of the Audi's wheels are driven all the time, changing direction at speed requires rather less of a wing and a prayer, even when conditions on the ground aren't exactly ideal.
It's your mother on the phone, Roger.
The four-wheel drive Audis. Vorsprung, durch, Technik, as they say in Germany.
And as you can spot from that, we pronounce it really badly, all right? I used to get loads and loads of letters from German teachers in the UK, you know, to say, you're pronouncing this incorrectly. And we would go, that's the joke, it's the point, you know. But, anyway, we turned that into the most famous car sign-off line in the UK. So in the UK today, you can go and say, you know, when Boris Becker was playing tennis and he wasn't winning, the headline would say, Boris has lost his Vorsprung, you know, and that's how famous it became. The other great thing about that was, you hear how technology beats you, doesn't it? She hands the phone out and it's on a cord, you know. Does that date it or does that date it? And this is another one, I haven't got time to show this, but you can go and see it online. And it was for Levi's, and it was about a kid smuggling in a pair of 501s into the Soviet Union. And you play that to kids today and they go, what's the problem? Why is that? Really, you know, things are made for a moment in time. I'm just going to flip through some of these. This was a great campaign we did, and again for Boddington's, and again irreverence. You know, you can't talk about creaminess like that. Creaminess was the value of the pint. You can't talk about it now. You can't. This is a beer for men. You can't show an ice cream cone. You can, and turn it into a huge success. We did, you know, it's a fantastic campaign. In fact, the campaign was so successful we could run the ads without any branding on at all. It just says the cream of Manchester at the bottom there, because people instantly went Boddington's, and that's what branding is. It's not about making the logo bigger. It's about having an idea that infects the whole piece of work. This was a great campaign we did. We launched Haagen-Dazs in the UK, and again, you know, the lesson in this one was to kind of go, you know, so often you're dealing with a brand and everybody's playing in the same place and everybody's fighting for a bit of position. And we were launching a premium ice cream. British don't really eat a lot of ice cream. It's usually a kid's thing. How are you going to launch a premium ice cream? The obvious thing was to talk about the ingredients, but the ingredients in this were truly fantastic. We talked about, but the ingredients, you could talk about the ingredients, but that's rather boring. Why don't we talk about the pleasure the ingredients give? And instead of talking about dedicated to quality, we said it's dedicated to pleasure. And we said ice cream isn't about eating ice cream, it's about a pleasurable encounter. And we changed the way people viewed ice cream and created a completely different category for Haagen-Dazs, which was, again, as I say, hugely successful. And I love this one too for Levi's. I like them best just before they fall apart. I mean, again. And the other thing here is, the other thing that we've always tried to believe in, or really, is tell the truth. You know, that ad I showed you for food hygiene about what a fly does. We were just telling you the truth. This is what happens. This is, you know, I like them best just before they fall apart. It's the truth. People think advertising is an industry where what you've got to do is mask the truth, you know, hide the truth. I don't know, you might have picked up here, some big cosmetic companies in the UK are being stopped now, airbrushing models when they're selling, you know, creams that make your skin look younger. They're airbrushing them. They've been stopped doing that. Why don't they just try and tell the truth for a change? Truth is the most powerful strategy you can employ. Absolutely fantastic. You know, you can always remember it, which is good. People like it. Surely that's good. Your task is just make it interesting. And that's what we should be doing. Find the truth. Examine the truth. And that's what that did. This was another one we did for a fashion brand in the UK, Wallace Dress to Kill. And the reason I like this is that we ran this ad and we then got a letter from Porsche saying that we want you to desist running this ad because it shows Porsche in a very bad light. And I remember there's a famous Groucho Marx letter, two letters from Groucho Marx, one from Warner Brothers to him and his reply to Warner Brothers. And I remember this when this came up. And these two letters were, Groucho Marx was making a movie called A Night in Casablanca, about to release it. Warner Brothers were making a movie called Casablanca. I'm sure we've all seen it, you might have seen them both. Warner Brothers write to Groucho Marx and say, we understand you're launching a film called A Night in Casablanca. We want you to know that we're launching a film before you called Casablanca. If you do launch this film, A Night in Casablanca, we'll sue you. To which Groucho Marx wrote back, and he's got his leave in his book, you can see, and he writes back and he says, "Dear sirs, I have no intention whatsoever of changing the name of our film. It will be launched and it will be A Night in Casablanca. However, I have noticed from your letter that you're called Warner Brothers. We were the Marx Brothers before you were Warner Brothers. If you don't desist using the phrase Warner Brothers, we will sue you." They never heard from him. They never heard again from Warner Brothers. And as you know, the two films, you can see the letters in his book. It's brilliant. So I get this, and we get this letter, and the account man goes, oh my God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I say, it's very simple. You write back to Porsche, and you say, we investigated with, we asked the AA, which cars are you most likely to have an accident in? And they came back, and they gave a list of cars, of which that was one. So you write back to them saying, we're not going to change that. The reason we've used a Porsche is that you're more likely to have an accident in a Porsche. Shall we publish that as a figure? At which point we never heard back from Porsche again. So there's always a way of shutting people up. A bit of humour and a bit of research always works. I like that. Maybe I would love to see the bloke's face as he read the letter. Oh my God, they're going to publish the fact that you're more likely to have an accident in a Porsche. Well, of course, our car goes so bloody fast, you know. But anyway, haven't got time for that one. Keep going. I'm going to keep going because you know it's just sort of. I wanted to see if we can do some questions. The other thing that the reason I called my book "Turning Intelligence into Magic," apart from it should have been called "Don't Read This Book," which is somebody agrees with me. Is that actually the thing that's really made BBH, I think, stand out, one of our differences, is that we really genuinely put together great strategic thinking with fabulous, hopefully fabulous, creative execution, so intelligence and magic. And we use a number of examples, and I think Johnny Walker was one of the examples that we've used where the intelligence and the magic came together. And the reason that happened is that the strategic thinkers, we were asked to pitch for Johnny Walker. Problem was whiskey sales in decline, not very relevant. People were, you know, bailing out of the market. I mean, you can understand. And it had always been, whiskey had always been sort of presented as a place, you know, for people who are successful. And that was a kind of tradition with whiskey, you know, people on yachts and people wearing tuxedos and being in kind of penthouses and the usual crap that people come up with. And the strategic guys said, look, it is about success, but success isn't a place. Success is a journey. It's always a journey. Successful people never arrive. They're always doing something. That's the true measure of success. Success is progress. And that's how we should present success. And from that, we get very quickly to keep walking. And I think that's a wonderful example of how strategic unleashes creative. Because you think to yourself, it's called Johnny Walker. It has a striding man as its symbol, you know, and nobody got to keep walking. Because nobody had said success isn't a place, success is a journey. And I think that's why, you know, great strategic thinking aligned to brilliant, hopefully brilliant execution unleashes a great campaign. And that's, to me, fundamentally important. And we did a whole, these are just some of the ads we've done. It's been running now for about 10 years. I think I'm going to show this because it's my favourite. You know, people say to me, you know, John, which is, you know, your favourite Levi's ad and kind of that. And I always say that this one for me is my favourite. I mean, a number of reasons why I like that. You know, I think there's the magic bit is you see that script written down, you go, yeah, okay, that could be good, that could be good, that could be, and then it comes together and something happens in the edit that you can't explain. That's why I love working with film. Something happens that you just, why is that brilliant? Why is that all so fantastic? Of course, you try and go back and work it all out, and just the look of it, the feel of it, the use of music, sort of slightly churchish music on start with, and then goes into that heavy guitar. And then, of course, the other thing is humour. And whenever, we had our, people used to copy what we were doing, they always forgot that we tried to make people laugh or smile. And humour is the most powerful force you can use. And it's the most, if you're trying to sell style, it's the most stylish thing you can be. Make somebody smile, make somebody laugh. And most people, when they're selling luxury, never do that. They think it's all about being cool and being unshaven and looking moody and blah, blah, blah. And they all look the same. And yet, if you go to the movies, James Bond, supposed to be a cool, wonderful character, makes people, he's always telling jokes, Hollywood understands this, advertising doesn't, luxury brands don't. And part of the success of Levi's was using humour. And of course, the other great thing I love about humour is the enemy of authority, and I've never liked authority, so, but whenever we were copied, they always forgot that humour is powerful and a fundamental force in what we were doing. This was great. It was after about 10 or 12 years of these, very cool characters who hopefully were funny, a bit of humour in them. Levi said, look, I think, maybe we should try and do a different kind of hero. And I said, yeah, no, I think it's time that we tried something different. And I said, I'm quite interested in the idea of relationships. Maybe there's sort of something we could do about relationships, instead of it just being a single individual. And they think, well, that's really good, John. That's really, really interesting. Fantastic. So we went away and briefed people, and we sort of looked at lots of scripts, and I was kind of like, it was all very ordinary. And I'd seen this, a fluffy puppet, and thought, wouldn't it be interesting if, we did have a new Levi's hero, but he wasn't a sort of, a six-pack, slightly unshaven, chiselled-looking guy. It was a fluffy puppet. And everybody, initially people thought I'd gone mad, I said, no, it could be really great. And so we wrote up some scripts, and I kind of presented it to Levi's as, sort of Jack Kerouac on the road, that relationship between Kerouac and Cassidy, really interesting. And they're going, yeah, that's really good, John, we like that. That could be fun. They were thinking jeans, people. And so I basically described the script that was there. You can see, I haven't got time to show it now, but anyway. And they thought, oh, we love this, John. It's really, really good. Fantastic. I said, yeah, I'm glad you. Oh, I said, there's just one thing I haven't told you. I said, what? I said, one of the characters is a fluffy yellow puppet called Flat Eric. What? Have you gone completely mad? Are you barking mad? I said, no, this is it. And eventually, I had to go back 4 times to sell it to them. They kept saying no. And eventually they bought it, and then Flat Eric appeared. My only regret is, part of the media, and this is where, it's really important when you're working on a campaign to be involved in the media where it runs, is I wanted to get the back pages of Vogue, the back cover of Vogue. It's usually a Marnie with a bloke there, and just have Flat Eric on the back with Levi's, And it would have been so cool, wouldn't it? I thought that would have just been fantastic.
Could I see your papers, please?
What's really happening to me? Everybody else seems to know.
Mind stepping out of the car, sir?
What a long can be. Why can't you look
Could you open the trunk,
at
please?
me like you one time looked
Have a good day, gentlemen.
Maybe you could tell me.
This is a campaign, a couple of other things, and I'll stop, because somebody might like to ask some questions. I was very lucky. I went, when we opened in the States, I went over there for 2.5 years and worked in America. And one of the campaigns I did was this one for Reebok, about their classics. And I had this idea that I wanted the photographs to be those beautiful, sort of like Irving Penn, Richard Avedon, Burt Stern type classic portraits that came out of the 60s and were really beautifully lit, sort of like painterly, North Light, all that sort of stuff. And so I said to the art buyer, I'd love to work with Burt Stern. Now, for those who don't know, Burt Stern made Jazz on a Summer's Day when he was 28 in 1958. If anybody likes jazz here, and you haven't seen Jazz on a Summer's Day, you can get it on DVD. Shame on you. You should see it. And actually, for those also, there are about 20 ideas in there that you could nick. You know, so another reason why you should go and see it. Brilliant movie, made in 1958. But his fame came from, he took the last photographs of Marilyn. And this is a little story. And he told me this amazing story. When I was coming back, having been in America for 2.5 years, Philippa and my partner and I said, well, we want to bring something back. And I've been working with Stern. And he told me this story about the Marilyn pictures. And he said that actually, 2 weeks after she died, committed suicide, he gets a knock on his studio door. And he said, and this is him telling me the story, and he opened the door and he said, you know when you're talking to the mafia. He said, just know it. Just two guys, two goons standing there. And they said, we want the pictures of Marilyn. And he thought, these are the people you don't argue with. So he goes back into his studio, picks up about 5 rolls, gives them to him. They go away. Of course, they didn't realise that he'd been shooting for 2 days and he had 200 rolls. Anyway, Ripple dissolved, time goes by, he publishes a book, it's called The Last Sitting, very famous book, The Last Photographs of Marilyn. And then in 1999, he gets a phone call from a photographic printer who says, I know your work, and somebody has brought in some transparencies for me to print, and I know they're from The Last Sitting. And Stern says, right, he gets his lawyer involved, and the lawyer meets this person and says, look, where did you get these pictures? Wouldn't tell him. And he said, right, the only way these pictures are going to be worth anything is Burt Stern gives you a set of signed prints for 9 of them, and then that's worth something, and you've got to return them to us, which the guy did. And so he republished this, and you can get the book now, you can get the book, it's out there now, The Last Sitting, including The Lost Sitting. And the story is on the back page, except he doesn't quite tell it absolutely like that. And the pictures he happened to give to the mafia, sheer coincidence, was he dressed Marilyn as Jackie Kennedy. Wow. So she's in a black wig, and they inadvertently, those are the ones you gave away. And so we came back, and I got a set of those prints. And it was wonderful to work with this man. He was an absolute, I love it, it's just a great story, isn't it? But he took these fantastic pictures, just wonderful. That caused a bit of a furore in America, as you can understand. Nudity is a major problem for Americans. You know, the fact that we're all naked underneath clothing is something that, you know. And Iggy Pop was fantastic. And that was a wonderful campaign to work on. That was a Levi's thing, do that. That was, wonderful, absolutely amazing. I want to get to something and talk about something. Yeah, that's stuff we're doing now in new media. And this is what it's really about. And in my book I say, this is how advertising drove me to drink. All right? Now, I just want to say one thing to you, that if ever you want to start a vineyard, don't. Right? So I'm for you, coming tonight, I will have saved you vast amounts of money. Whatever you do, don't start a vineyard. Do start a company. Do start something where you are in charge of the brand. How big should the logo be? All of those things. You make those decisions. And what's great about it, what I love about it, is my partner Nigel says, in our industry, we never make important decisions. Our clients make important decisions. We don't make important. We make recommendations. And so when you have your own brand, you will have to start making the important decisions. You know, how big should the logo be? What should I call it? You know, somebody said to me, why did you call it Hegarty? And I said, look, first lesson of marketing and branding is to be remembered, right? If you're not remembered, nobody can buy it. Now, imagine if I called it, the domain is called Domaine de Chamons, right? Unless you've got a brain the size of Pluto, you'd have forgotten in about 30 seconds that it was Domaine de Chamons. If I say to you it's called Hegarty Chamons, you will remember. First lesson in marketing, be remembered. But actually, having said that and deciding that I'm going to lose a vast amount of money, so when you drink this wine, if you do drink it, remember, it's actually called Hegarty Chamons. And I had to explain to somebody when they were buying some and they wanted to pay me less for it. I said, it's not called Hegarty Charity, it's called Hegarty Chamons. But what's brilliant about it is that I'm now a farmer. I may not look like it at the moment, but actually technically I'm a farmer. I grow grapes. And it's fantastic when you step out, again, when you step outside of the world you're in and you do something that is nothing to do, in a sense, with advertising. You're doing something totally different. And you learn about organic farming, you learn about biodynamic. We're biodynamic farmers. Demeter, I think you call it here in Germany. And it's just brilliant to see a piece of land come back to life. And that's making brand decisions. So I'd just like you to remember that when you buy a bottle of this wine, that you're probably getting it below cost, and that should make you enjoy it even more. So listen, I think I've gone on long enough. Back to that, and if there are any questions, happy to answer them. If you just want to go and have a drink, go and have a drink or whatever. So thank you very much.
I understand that Levi's was your first account opening BBH, is that right?
No, it was second. It was the third account.
Okay.
Audi was the first account, then Whitbread, who were a brewer, who did Boddington's. So Levi's was our third account.
But there's this rumor going on that you won the pitch, the Levi's pitch, with not presenting creative ideas, but a proper market research. Is that true?
Absolutely true, 100%.
Were you the first one in the UK? Can we say that you more or less brought the sense for doing market research into British advertising?
Well, no, it was BNP who were founded in about 1967, 68, were the ones who really started that. I would argue, I think we did it particularly well. I mean, I think our skill was putting creativity, strategy and creativity together. But certainly on the Levi's pitch, we were asked to pitch, and it was a very funny, I think I tell the story in my book, and we'd only been opened about 2 months, and we thought it was a joke. We thought the letter from marketing, it was somebody winding us up, you know, would you please pitch for the Levi's account? No, someone's got a hold of it. Anyway, so we called up and they said, no, we're going to come and see you. And we started working on the pitch, and they had 5 agencies, which is quite a lot, of which we were one. And we'd heard other agencies as shot commercials and stuff like that. And we were sitting there without even an office at that moment. We were just setting the whole thing up. And we almost pulled out. We almost thought, this is ridiculous. It's never going to work. You know. But we decided, because we weren't going to show creative work, we'd explained that all along. They looked at us in a slightly bemused fashion when we said that. But what we did, what it allowed us to do, it was allowed us to sort of go back to the roots and the basis of their problem. Because at that time, in 1982, they were in serious trouble. It's a long story, I won't go into it now. And what we did is we gave them the strategic direction the brand needed to go in to actually succeed. And that's how we won the business. And there is also a nice little story about, actually that time we had virtually no office, except we had these brilliant Italian chairs. They were just fantastic Italian chairs that we bought. And the head man from America comes over, Lee Smith. I always remember him. He's very, very American, about, 2 meters 5, looked as though he jogged 3 times a day, suntan, shook your hand and crushed it, oh God, bloody hell. And I looked at him, I thought, we're no way we're going to win this. He's Mr. Corporate, Anyway, we did the pitch and we just told them what we thought. And nobody else had really told them what they thought. They'd gone to execution, not to strategy. And they all turned to Lee Smith and said, Lee, so what do you think? Lee was, this rugged American and all that stuff going on. And he sat there and I thought, this is it, it's all over. He's going to say, you must be joking, we can't hire an agent. They haven't even got an office, you know. And Lee said, I just want to say one thing. I thought, this is it, this is it. He said, these are the most comfortable chairs I've ever seen. And we won the business. An Italian chair won us the business. But it's absolutely true, we didn't present any creative.
I just wanted to ask you, compared to some of the executions you did with 20, 30 years ago, do you think that in marketing and advertising now you have to be more radical or less, because it seems to be quite a conservative marketplace? And obviously the problem is that there are far more media channels these days.
Yeah, I think the question is, today, do you have to be more radical or less radical? And it seems to me that I look at a lot of work and it seems that I see less radical work. And I think in a way, you need to be more radical, not less radical. There's increasingly, with more choice, more opportunity, we need to stand out even more. More irreverence is needed. Of course, it has to be relevant, that irreverence. But, increasingly I see work that is, very, very plain, very ordinary. And I think it's weird, actually. I think we are, although I say this is the most exciting time to be in advertising, I genuinely mean that, because I think it's really incredible what's happening with technology and stuff like that and the opportunities it's giving us. But also I think it's made people over-rely on the technology, not on the idea. And I always say, advertising is 80% idea, but it's also 80% execution. It's the great conundrum, isn't it? But I look at a lot of work today, and I sort of see people talking about the technology, not about the idea. And I think really we're sort of like a slight trough. I think we'll come out of it, because in the end, we look at certainly you look at it from the UK. You looked at Cadbury's Gorilla was an incredibly irreverent idea, incredibly irreverent, and was hugely successful. Hugely successful. I mean, it was great bravery of them to do that. Or you look at Sony balls, which was kind of completely off the wall idea, brilliantly successful. So the examples are there, and we're doing stuff now. We're talking about, we call it super bold, super social, where we've done. We launched last year, not launched, but we advertised them for the first time. A dairy company in the west of England, very small. We took all their budget. We ran a 2-minute commercial in a program called X Factor. And it was all about Yo, is the name of the company, which is very difficult to pronounce in the UK, even though it's a very old English name. Nobody knows how to pronounce it. So we did a rap, Yo. Yeah, I know. And also they wanted to make organic farming more populist, so that worked for it. We did a 2-minute commercial. We out-tweeted X Factor for the first 14 hours. You can see all the facts are up there. It's amazing success. And that was doing something really bold, something different. We've sort of titled this Super Bold, Super Social. And then we managed the social side of it. And it got huge response. So the evidence is there, but for some reason people retreat to comfort zones, which is a great tragedy. We have to constantly fight that.
Is that got to do with society though? I mean, Google are talking about now being a revolution in communication, and we're all talking about web and digital and how. But isn't it the fact that though in the 70s, in the 60s and 70s, when these big brands broke out, was that society was looking to break out? Society was looking for new. Society was looking for excitement. Now it would shun it, and you talk about how you go around and take ideas, and that society actually now would not respect and not react to phenomenally creative ideas, and thereby the age of the big, phenomenal agencies is now being challenged.
Well, I would absolutely fundamentally disagree with that. I think if you look at what Cadbury's did with Gorilla, if you look at the success of that, it not only increased sales, it increased the company's share price. You look at what Sony did, you look at what we've done. We've just got the top award of the Marketing Society Award in the UK for Yo Valley, increased sales by something like 12%, literally overnight. So I don't buy that. I don't buy that people suddenly don't want interesting ideas. Since the beginning of time, people wanted interesting ideas. I always sort of say, Gutenberg, who invented movable type and the printing press and all that, Gutenberg was the Steve Jobs of his day. All right? But what did he do? He printed the fucking Bible. You know, big deal. Read that. Give us, what else? You know, I want to do another book called Can You Name Gutenberg's Second Book? Well, you can't, because he didn't print one. Because in the end, he didn't have any ideas. He was a technologist who actually changed the way we communicated and, you know, liberated communication. But ultimately, we need great ideas. We need ideas that change the way people feel and think. And there's, I'd say the opposite. I think people are craving it. As there's more stuff out there, they need things to stand out. They need it. They're desperate for it. Quite the opposite. And I don't think that will never change. You know, that will never, ever, ever change. We are fascinated with that. We're fascinated by that.
Two questions. Why was the Flat Eric puppet never available for the public as the adverts ran? And second,
Well, it was. Yeah. That's the answer to that question, right? Okay, second question.
And the second question would be, do you think it would be possible to create another Flat Eric in these days now for the whole world? I mean, the Cadbury's Gorilla, we don't have Cadbury's in Germany,
Yeah.
but Flat Eric was like a global symbol which touched everybody. Do you think you could manage that, or your company could manage that these days again? And what would their product be?
Well, I can't tell you what the product would be. I certainly, did everybody hear that question about could we do another Flat Eric in today's environment? I mean, you know, that was only 10 years ago. I mean, isn't it as though we've all suddenly grown two brains, or, you know, we stopped liking going to the cinema, or we've stopped liking funny characters? I mean, you look at what Pixar are doing with, you know, animation. I think it's amazing. I think, obviously, I have to believe you can do that. You must believe that you can do that. What you need is a partnership with a client who's prepared to do it. And sadly, as I say, we're so kind of, you know, driven by research today. We're losing, in a sense, and the thing that we've all got to fight, we're losing those entrepreneurial characters, those entrepreneurial figures who would do something because of the global nature. It's the downside of today, the global nature of what we do. It's harder getting people to buy different and daring ideas. But, you know, the other thing that I'm cursed as an optimist. You've got to understand that. I think revolutions start on the edges. I don't think they start in the center. I think they start on the edges. Somebody does something little over there, and that gradually moves into the center and explodes the center. And I think today you can do lots of things on the edges that can change the way companies operate and how you can show them things can be successful. So I remain optimistic about being able to do that.
I have one, John. We are about helping to turn a great creative into a great creative leader. You went through that transition. Can you say something about, was it easy, was it natural, or was it also something for you to overcome?
Yeah, well, I did. I used to loathe going to see clients. I used to hate it. I was, you know, incredibly shy and didn't want to do it and stuff like that. And gradually, I mean, and there are a number of clients here, yes. I realised that, you know, I always thought, I had this view that, oh God, they must be so super intelligent. They're the client. My God, they must be, you know, brains like this, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, oh, I'm a bit of creative and I just do funny things and gradually, as I met people, I sort of thought, yeah, no, they're very nice, but they were flawed. They weren't the geniuses I thought they were. And gradually, as I kind of met more and more people, I realized, you know, what you should never be is in awe of anybody. I think you should respect people. I don't think you should be in awe of anybody. And that was the thing that really, for me, changed. And we become in awe of people. When we become in awe of people, it is dangerous. That's why the banking crisis happened, because we were in awe of these bankers who seemed to know what they were talking about when they, you know, talked about credited debts or whatever it might be. You know, oh, they must be. We didn't go, wait a minute, hold on, let's question it. I don't agree with that. We've just seen something in the UK with the Murdoch Empire. Our politicians were in awe of this man. So that was the first thing. And the other thing that I learned is that and it was a sort of lesson, I thought you must never, if you're trying to sell something to somebody, you must never use your language. You've got to be you must be you, but try and understand their problem. try and understand what are they trying to communicate. So it'd be no good, you know, if I go in and say, well, I think you should use these photographers because I think they're beautiful photographs and the lighting is wonderful. The client would just go, what's he talking about? You know, if I talk about impact, if I talk about standout, that this type of photography in that magazine will really stand out, the client goes, oh, I get that. That's why, you know. So you've got to use the language that they understand. Fundamentally important, that. And that was one of the things that I learned, is listen to what they're saying and respond to what they're saying in language that they can understand and they relate to. And then I think you have a chance of selling something. Not always, but that's what I learned.
Well, John, we are very happy to have you here tonight.
Thank you.
Tomorrow, you will give a masterclass, I think, focused on differentiation.
Yep.
Also for the service John has given over the last year, being a godfather. That's a godfather.
Yeah.
But for
I'm a grandfather now. God, no.
Participants, John gave a scholarship to find more women coming to leadership. I think we are very happy about this. And we will have John actually to sign some books if you purchase some. So it was
Please.
great to have
I have a vineyard to support. Please.
So here's to John. We are very happy
Thank you,
that we had you here. Thank you so much.
A pleasure.